Copepods look closely at the water. That tiny bullet-shaped creature darting through in short, frantic bursts. That's a copepod. It moves like it's being chased, and honestly, it usually is. Measuring between just 0.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters in length, it's barely visible to the naked eye. Yet, it carries the entire weight of the food web on its microscopic shoulder. Almost every predator in this jar depends on it. The copepod feeds on algae, bacteria, and particles of dead organic matter drifting in the water. It has a single red eye spot at the center of its head, 2 protruding antennae, and a bullet-shaped body built purely for speed. The females carry egg sacs attached to their abdomen, little bundles of the next generation, held close until the moment is right. And here is the part that should stop you cold. If this puddle dried up tomorrow, certain copepods wouldn't simply die. Specifically, cyclopoid and harpactic produce diapausing eggs, eggs that lock down their own biology, go completely inactive and wait, sealed inside dried mud, for years until water returns and something impossible quietly happens again. Rotifers, you almost miss them. They're so small that even calling them tiny feels like an oversight. Rotifers measure between 0.1 and 0.5 millimeters, some as small as 50 micrometers, smaller than the period at the center. And yet, inside that almost invisible body is a brain, a digestive system, muscles, and a complete nervous system, all packed into an animal built from only about 1,000 cells total. There are more than 1,000 known species, and they are absolutely everywhere in water. They consume bacteria and algae at the very base of the chain, and in return, nearly everything above them treats them as a meal. Their lives are short and extraordinarily fast. Some species develop from egg to reproductive adult in as little as half a day. But when conditions turn hostile, certain species reach for something that defies easy explanation. They enter cryptobiosis, shutting their metabolism down so completely that they essentially stop existing as living things without dying. Russian scientists proved just how far this ability goes when in 2021 they successfully revived rotifers that had been frozen in Siberian permafrost for over 24,000 years. They came back, they reproduced, life refusing to stay dead. Ostracods, at first glance, they look like tiny swimming sealed shut inside a hinged shell. That shell is the secret to everything about them. Ostracods, also called siege mussel, are small crustaceans measuring between 1 millimeter and 3 millimeters in freshwater, enclosed inside a bivalve-like shell made of chitin and calcium carbonate. When danger approaches, they pull every appendage inward and clamp that shell closed, a living vault sealed from the outside world. Inside, they carry 2 pairs of antennae for sensing their environment, mandibles for feeding, and legs used for crawling, swimming, and grooming. Like all crustaceans, they grow by molting, shedding their old shell and building a new one. This happens 8 times before adulthood, sometimes in as little as 30 days. Their diet is fundamentally humble: detritus, algae, bacteria, the quiet cleanup crew of the jar. But here is the most unsettling fact about them. When a fish swallows an ostracod, up to 26% of them survive the entire journey through the gut, emerging alive on the other side. They are not just surviving predation, they are using it to travel to new water bodies entirely. Predator becomes the vehicle. Vorticella something is attached to the glass. It looks like a tiny white flower on a trembling stalk, swaying gently in the current. Beautiful. Then something brushes, and in a fraction of a second it snaps back, coiling its stalk like a compressed spring, yanking its bell-shaped body tight against the surface. Pure reflex. That is Vorticella, single-celled organism, invisible to the naked eye, belonging to the phylum Ciliophora. Its bell-shaped body measures only 30-40 micrometers across, its stalk stretching up to 100 micrometers long, a biological contraption so precisely engineered that its spring-like contraction happens in just a few milliseconds. It feeds by beating rings of hair-like cilia to sweep bacteria and small protozoans directly into its mouth. It doesn't swim, it doesn't chase. It anchors itself to any available surface, glass, debris, rocks, and the living shells of crustaceans, and simply filters the water flowing past. The danger begins when it spreads unchecked. Vorticella coats every surface in a thick white layer, restricting movement and interfering with the breathing of every animal it clings to, slowly making the environment more hostile for everything around it. The only biological force keeping it in check is rotifers, documented predators of Vorticella, along with predatory ciliates in the surrounding water, locked in a silent, invisible tug-of-war that never truly ends. Diving beetles, something large just moved fast. Before your eyes could follow it, it was gone, cutting through the water like a torpedo with legs. That is a diving beetle, family Diticity, and it is the most powerful macroscopic predator in this The family spans over 4,000 species across every continent except Antarctica, and every adult member has solved the same impossible problem: how to hunt underwater without gills, through one elegant, ruthless adaptation. Its surface traps a bubble of air beneath its hardened wing covers called elytra, inside a space called the subelytral cavity, and carries that bubble down as a personal oxygen. As it burns through the oxygen, the bubble simultaneously acts as a physical gill, drawing dissolved oxygen from the surrounding water to partially replenish it, extending the dive beyond what a simple air tank could manage. When the bubble finally depletes, the beetle must return to the surface. There is no alternative. Adult Diticity do not possess tracheal gills. Those belong to larvae and to other aquatic insects like mayfly and damselfly nymph. The adult lives entirely by its bubble, surfacing, refilling, and descending again in a cycle driven purely by the need to hunt. And hunt it does. The larvae are, if anything, even more ruthless, nicknamed water tigers by research, floating motionless at the surface and seizing anything that passes within reach of their large, grasping predatory mosquito larvae. Everything else in this jar is afraid of this. The predatory mosquito larva sits at the absolute top of the food web, and it did not earn that position, size, or armor. It earned it. The strike happens in milliseconds, a blur so fast the human eye cannot register it as movement. Scientists spent years unable to document it properly. It was not until researchers equipped with high-speed microscope cameras published their finding in the Annals of the Entomological Society of America that the full picture finally emerged, and what they found stopped them cold. Obligate predatory species, like toxorynchids, launch their own heads forward in a sudden explosive neck extension, a biological harpoon, driving massive, heavily toothed mandible into prey before any reaction is physically possible. But speed is only part of what makes this larva genuinely terrifying. It does not hunt purely out of hunger. These larvae exhibit compulsive killing behavior. They attack and eliminate other aquatic larvae by instinct, clearing the water around them of anything that moves, regardless of whether they intend to eat it. A single larva can consume hundreds to well over 1,000 prey before reaching adulthood, with some laboratory studies reporting figures as high as 5,000 under unoptimal conditions, numbers that vary in the wild, but speak to the sheer relentlessness of the behavior. Nothing in this jar is safe. Not the ostracod, not the worms, not even other larvae of its own kind. Aquatic flatworms, they glide. That is the only word for legs, no fins, no visible means of propulsion, and yet the flatworm moves across the glass with an almost supernatural smoothness, as if friction simply refuses to apply to it. These are free-living flatworms, propelled by thousands of microscopic cilia on their underside, beating in coordinated waves across a self-secreted layer of mucus. They hunt by chemistry, sensing dissolved chemical signals in the water to track prey they cannot see. When they make contact, there are no teeth, no claws. Instead, the flatworm extends a tube-like pharynx from the middle of its body, presses it against the prey, and begins digesting it from the outside in, breaking down tissue externally before drawing the nutrients inward. When food disappears entirely, flatworms perform something stranger. They begin consuming them, slowly breaking down their own internal tissue through a controlled process called degrowth, shrinking their bodies while carefully preserving their most critical organ, waiting for conditions to change. When food returns, they rebuild, patient, efficient, quietly horrifying. Aquatic worms deep in the mud. Something has been building in the dark. Tunnels, constructed from compacted sediment and the remains of dead organisms, run beneath the surface of the jar floor. The worm stays down there for good reason. Every time it leaves its tunnel, it enters open water, and open water in this jar is a killing ground. The predatory larvae patrol those spaces. They are always watching. The worms that survive are the ones that leave only when they must, moving quickly through Vorticella colonies like an icebreaker sea ice, bulldozing through the white coating that smothers everything else. What these worms do in the sediment is unglamorous and essential in equal measure. They break down dead organic matter, processing waste and cycling nutrients back into the water column. Without that work, oxygen depletes. Chemistry. The water turns hostile and the ecosystem collapses inward. The worm never gets the dramatic, but remove it, and everything else begins to die. Aquatic mites clinging to the glass, moving slowly and deliberately while everything else rushes past it, is the aquatic mite, an arachnid, 8-legged, from the same ancient lineage as spiders and scorpions, except this one crossed into freshwater and never looked back. Aquatic mites inhabit virtually every freshwater environment on Earth, from deep lakes to the shallowest temporary puddles. Some are active predators of smaller invertebrates. Others run a more parasitic strategy, attaching themselves to aquatic insects during one phase of their life cycle, feeding on fluids, then detaching and completing their development freely in the water. In a jar like this one, the mite moves through its environment as a slow but persistent hunter, largely ignored by the larger predators that prefer faster, more reactive prey. It does not compete for attention. It does not need to. In a world where everything conspicuous tends to get quiet and slow, turns out to be a remarkably effective survival strategy.